Hey everybody, welcome into the latest edition of the Pokescast, production of the Casper Star-Tribune and Pokes Authority. I am Davis Potter, Wyoming beat writer for the Star-Tribune, and I'm joined, as I usually am, by our managing editor and former Wyoming Bitnik, Brandon Foster. Brandon, I figure I would just open up by asking you this, since everybody else is seemingly doing it. Have you entered the transfer portal yet?
No, but I have entered the Super League. I'm planning to take some of the vacancies that have just opened. So I've got a set of goalie gloves. I feel like that qualifies me.
Yeah, that went away real quick, didn't it? What did that last, like less than 24 hours?
It did not last long enough for me to fully figure out what it was. So.
Yeah. I wonder, my idea of a super league would just be Wyoming and Colorado State forming its own two-team league and just playing each other exclusively in every sport. Like have it just a 12-game football season, but nothing but border wars.
I like it. They should literally play on the border, like set up a volleyball net on either side or something. Call it the I don't know. I have no idea what you call it. The SEC 2. Why not?
Or the border league.
Make people mad.
The border league.
There you go. Take note, Tom Berman. Get on it.
Okay, so by the way, speaking of the transfer portal, did you see the tweets that Dick Vitale put out?
If I had a nickel every time I was asked that, no, I have not.
Yeah, so apparently he was tweeting about talking to a bunch of coaches about their concern with tampering. Which, for anybody who listening doesn't know what that is basically when coaches at other schools start contacting players who aren't officially in the transfer portal yet. But I just thought it was funny. I mean, look, first of all, I don't want to, take tampering lightly. I mean, if you, because I mean, it is wrong, and if you get caught doing it, you should be penalized for it, because it's always important to remember that schools at every level of the NCAA are voluntary members of the NCAA. So these are rules that every NCAA school has agreed to. So if you're going to break those rules and you get caught doing it, you absolutely should be penalized for it. I just think it's funny, sometimes what people get caught up in a tizzy about and what they don't. I mean, wait till Dickie V finds out that a high-profile college basketball coach is on a federal wiretap talking about paying a player. He's going to have a heart attack.
Yeah, tampering, I don't quite understand what qualifies, because I imagine you have to be like, here, I'll throw you a segue. I imagine Marcus Williams I'm definitely not alleging anything, but he may have probably had an idea whether or not he could get into Texas A&M before he decided to leave UW. I would imagine there are at least some, I don't know anything. I've never talked to Marcus in my life. I'm just saying, I imagine when you're making that switch, you don't do it entirely in the blind.
Sure, right. No, I agree. But, I mean, there's a difference between, like, okay, let's make sure that my academics or whatever lined up, or they have enough scholarships where I fit in. There's a difference between that and, having a bunch of coaches actually, like, reaching out to you. And look, who knows? But that's also part of it, too, is, like, I like the fact that Dickie V acts like this is breaking news. Like, the tampering was not created because of the one-time transfer rule. I mean, coaches haven't just all of a sudden started doing this. I mean, this might have been a relevant subject 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, but this, it goes on. It's just a matter of, hey, you're going to get caught or not. But I would think, it's funny, I've never seen him mention the fact that the NCAA probably needs to address the situation about a coach on a federal wiretap. I mean, if I'm the NCAA and I've got a to-do list in terms of handing out penalties for infractions, I would think the coach that is on a federal wiretap talking about paying a player to come play for him would be number one. But, of course, the NCAA doesn't – asking them to make sense of anything they do is a tall task.
Yeah, I'm starting to get the sense the NCAA is bad. Is that what you're getting at here?
Yeah. I don't.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily if the NCAA's bad. I do think the NCAA does a lot of good things, but just in terms of their rules enforcement and what they choose to enforce, it's very selective. I mean, every basketball coach or assistant coach that was caught up in that FBI investigation has been penalized, except the one that was actually on a wiretap talking about paying a player money. His punishment thus far has been the 2 games that LSU played, and we're obviously talking about Will Wade here, but the 2 games that LSU played in the NCAA tournament 2 years ago, which was handed down by the school, not the NCAA. I don't know. But anyway, back to the point. I thought it was funny, A, because it's like, tampering's been going on for a while, and then B, like, that's what you decide to get in a tizzy about when it comes to NCAA enforcement. I mean, I think that there would be a lot more things above that on the to-do list, but to get mad about anyway.
Yeah, it's an odd subject to be temper tampering about.
Yeah,
that's all I got. I've got no tampering content for you.
But anyway, speaking of the transfer portal, as you just mentioned, Marcus Williams, the now former Wyoming point guard, officially closed the door on any potential of returning to Wyoming's program when he committed to Texas A&M over the weekend. So he is officially gone, and now I think Wyoming is going. You're going to see Wyoming get a little more active in the transfer portal because, look, unless Jeff Linder plans to move Hunter Maldonado or Xavier Ducell or another one of those off guards that point isn't their primary position, or unless he plans to let Ben Bowen, another true freshman coming in next year, run the point, the replacement for Marcus at the point is not on their current roster. Speaking of that, if you're a UW basketball fan and you want to keep track of who's coming, who's going, and who else might join the roster for next season, I do have a roster/scholarship tracker up at trib.com and postauthority.com with all that information, including some reported targets that Wyoming has at least contacted in the transfer portal to this point. So, yeah, I think that's going to be the direction that they go, because like I said, I don't know right now if they have a true point guard on the roster.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say if there are any University of Wyoming fans who want to try out for point guard, then here's the time and location. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how they're able to make use of the other half of this whole transfer situation. And I mean, as far as Marcus goes, I think obviously it's no outcome is going to be especially positive in UW's eyes, since we already knew he was leaving. But at least this is not, I guess, the worst case scenario. He's going to his home state. He's going to a Power 5 school. Like, maybe it's something you can live with a little bit more than if he were not doing those things, and then you were getting a sense of like, he just wanted to get out of Wyoming, and there's that situation wasn't working. So I guess that's very small positive there. And obviously Marble transferred to play with his former coach, so at least two of the two players that transferred went to very specific situations that maybe you can live with a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I think we mentioned last week, I mean, that was pretty much expected, that Marcus was going to sort of parlay that breakout freshman season he had at Wyoming into an opportunity at the high major level, and that's what he's doing. But there has not been any more official movement on Wyoming's end as far as the transfer portal goes. Now that's as of early Wednesday afternoon as we record this podcast. So obviously this stuff is so fluid, it can change at any moment. But as of now, Wyoming officially has 3 players that they lost to transfers, since last season. Now, Drew Lamont was the very first one to go into the portal like 5 games into last season. So he's been gone for a while. So really, and he wasn't that big of a contributor for them. So really, you consider the fact they really have 2 transfers that they've lost in terms of significant contributors for them. That's pretty good compared to, the number that every other program is losing. There's more than, like 1,400 transfers in the portal just in men's basketball alone. And there's 340 something Division I teams. I mean, you do the math. That's close to 4 or 5 transfers per team. So, I mean, right now they're on the low end of it. But again, I mean, this is so fluid, and all this stuff can change at any moment. But they have 2 scholarships open now, and I would expect them to fill one, if not both of them, for next season's roster, either through the transfer portal or maybe a late addition from a high school kid. I don't know, but. This whole thing is just, it's going to get more fluid and more fluid now that one-time transfer rule is all but official.
Yeah, we're in unprecedented territory in many regards, so we'll see how it plays out.
Hey guys, I'm interrupting this podcast quickly to provide an update on Wyoming's basketball recruiting. After we got done recording this podcast, the Cowboys picked up a commitment from Noah Reynolds, a 6'3", 195-pound point guard out of Peoria, Illinois, who is going to come to the Cowboys from the high school ranks, not the transfer portal. He was a high school senior this last year, so a late addition from the prep ranks for Wyoming, and a guy who very well could be the replacement for Marcus Williams. So Wyoming has now, assuming that Noah follows through on his commitment and eventually signs with Wyoming, which is all but a formality at this point. Wyoming will have used one of its last 2 scholarships. So Wyoming has one more scholarship available in the 2021 recruiting class, should they choose to use it. Again, if you want to keep up with all the comings and goings of Wyoming's basketball roster this off-season, you check out our roster tracker at trib.com and postauthority.com. That will be updated throughout the off-season. But it looks like now that Wyoming's picked up this commitment, they may finalize that roster for next season a little quicker than anticipated. Now I'll return you to the rest of the podcast. Brandon, go ahead and move on to some football. Wyoming held its 7th spring practice on Tuesday, so we'll talk a little bit about that here in this first segment, and specifically what some of the coaches and players said after Tuesday's practice during that media availability. And then in the second segment, we'll talk a little NFL draft with this year's draft coming up next week. I don't think Wyoming's going to have anybody drafted this year, in part because they have so many of those seniors that have elected to return for another year at Wyoming. But we'll maybe look at who might be Wyoming's top draft prospects for the 2022 draft. But first of all, with spring football, we got our first chance to talk to Jay Sawvel, Wyoming's second-year defensive coordinator. Probably the only time we'll talk to him this spring. We got to talk to him Tuesday night, along with linebacker Charles Hicks and Aiden Eberhardt, their senior receiver. And again, this is all, with practices being closed, we sort of have to take, what we're being told and take these comments from the coaches and players for what they're worth, just because we don't, the media doesn't get to go out and watch any practices. We don't get to see any of this stuff firsthand. But I think one of the things that Jay talked about is particularly with the opt-outs, because Wyoming, five of the 6 players that opted out last season were on the defensive side of the ball, and some of those were significant contributors for them. You talk about Rome Weber, who started all but one game at safety back in 2019, and Solomon Byrd, who led them in sacks that season and was probably going to be a starter opposite Garrett Crawl at that other defensive end spot. Mario Mora, who was their starting nose tackle. So getting some of those guys back. But Jay talked about the fact that, it's going to take these guys a little while. I mean, he hasn't been disappointed with what he's seen from them, but, he mentioned the fact that, when they opted out, that was it for them. They were away from the team, away from the facility. Even if they weren't playing, since they weren't playing games and practicing, they still weren't allowed into the facility, to lift and watch film and do all that stuff. I mean, they were completely isolated away from the team. So they've really been away from the program since last October until, they rejoined the team, I guess, during off-season workouts in January. So, I think one of the quotes he used was, you don't take 6 months off from running fast and then immediately run fast again. It's going to take these guys a little bit of time to get acclimated to what they're doing. But in terms of the defense overall, he did say that now entering a second year of the system, in terms of knowing the playbook and the mental side of it, that most of the guys are up to speed now and are more comfortable, and they're now, they're just reacting and not thinking so much. So, that's some of the general stuff, and I don't want to get too much into what we talked about, because I am still working on some stories, and I'm going to be writing some stories for Trib.com and PokesAuthority.com that I do want people to check out. So I don't want to give away too much here, but those are some of the general defensive takeaways I sort of took from it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to hear the coach's input on where those opt-out players are at, because you have players miss years to injury all the time, obviously, but this is if not a unique situation, a pretty unusual one to have so many players who missed a whole year and weren't around the team. So I think obviously I'm not shocked that they would be playing some catch up, whether it's working their way back up the depth chart, or like you said, just literally getting back in shape. But I mean, it also is, somewhat of a positive, I guess, that they're still around, right? That they stuck out a year where they didn't have access to those facilities, where they didn't have that culture of a team around them, and they were able to just be students for a year and didn't hang up the cleats or leave or whatever it may be. So it's good to see, I guess, that they made it through that, and hopefully are getting their wind back in their sails.
Yeah, and then I think some of the more interesting comments, honestly, from Jay and even some of the defensive players, is about what the offense is doing and what it looks like, under the new offensive coordinator Tim Polasek, and talking to Charles Hicks, he said that, and really just about every, whether it be defensive or offensive players that we've talked to this spring, the number one thing that keeps being repeated is energy. Seems to be a lot more energy on that side of the ball. Look, I don't know, maybe that's just more of having a new voice, because look, I mean, we've talked about before, and I've written about it. Craig Bowl and Brent Vigen coached basically 2 decades together, going back to their time at North Dakota State, and obviously that includes all 7 years that Craig's been at Wyoming. That can get very, very repetitive and mundane, just in terms of the same voice that you're hearing all the time. And so, I think some of that's expected when you finally bring in somebody new, that these players, anybody that's ever played at Wyoming under Craig Bowl, obviously that's our offensive player, I should say, that, Brent Vigen's voice and the way he likes to do things is all they've ever known. So to bring in something new, I think it's sort of like a shock value, almost a shock to your system to get somebody in new after all of that time. So, maybe that's just some of it. The fact that when you have change, there's going to be a different feel, a different voice, a different energy to an extent. But I mean, that's really been emphasized from like I said, just about every player that we've talked to about the offense and maybe how it's different under Tim Polasek. I mean, that's the first thing that they mentioned, is there's a real energy and a real positive energy. And then just in terms of, I guess the system or the schemes, they've talked about how there's a lot more movement in terms of formations and motions. And then one thing I did not expect to hear, and I never really expected to be talking about in terms of a Craig Bowl offense, is pace. Charles Hicks, the linebacker, actually said that that offense is moving really, really fast. Like they're getting done with one play and they're running up to the line and getting the ball snapped as fast as they can. And he actually said that he gets winded sometimes just trying to, because obviously with the offense lining up faster, it means the defense has to get lined up faster. And that's something that just that sort of took me back a little bit, because Wyoming is known as a they huddle and they take their time. They're not a no huddle hurry up team. And look, we're scheduled to talk to Tim Polasek on Thursday night following that practice. So maybe can ask him a little bit more exactly what that means and what they're doing in terms of pace. But it certainly sounds like that ties in with the energy and just playing, I guess, a little bit faster and picking up the pace, because this is an offense that is really, I mean, they've been top 50 nationally in time of possession. I mean, pace and going fast isn't necessarily what they're known for running this pro-style offense. So very interesting to hear some of that.
Yeah, and I'll be interested to see, how much of that is still around come this fall. I think at times there are certain teams and offenses that say that kind of stuff every camp. They're like, oh man, we're going fast this year, we're going to go faster, and then come game one they're running the same offense. But if they are doing that, I mean, because you gotta talk about something in spring ball, right? And God forbid you talk about any actual formations that you're running. So I mean, I think if they are actually implementing that is interesting. I don't know if we've talked about it on the Pokes cast, but I think it's come up a lot in the last 5 years on the basketball side of things about, when Allen Edwards took over, he wanted to run this up-tempo style of basketball, which was a pretty big contrast to the Larry Shiat speed. And, part of that was, there are teams that do that all over the country, run kind of that positionless basketball or whatever, but part of it was to take advantage of the altitude and the fact that, hey, let's get the other team winded and really have a home court advantage. Obviously, like you said, that hasn't been the MO with Craig Bowl. Maybe saw more of it in the Dave Christensen era, but I'd be interested to see how that plays out, because I think there are times when teams do that well, and it's not something you think about as running the ball fast, right? But there are times when like a really good offense, you'll notice they're wearing the defense down, and all of a sudden they start snapping the ball real early in the count. They start running it right down their throat and not giving the defense a chance to catch their breath. And that can be a really effective 1-2 punch if you can do it. So I'll be intrigued to see if that happens. But at the end of the day, you still gotta run an offense that gains yards, right? Like, nobody likes to watch a fast 3-and-out. It's just as boring as a slow 3-and-out. Like, you still gotta move the chains. And there is, not to say that they're gonna run like this super Mike Leach up tempo offense or whatever, but like they, you have to have success with that or else your defense is going to be on the field even longer. And that was maybe a slight saving grace these past years, as much struggle as their offense has had. At least when you're running the ball, you're burning some clock and saving your defense's legs a little bit. If you start, throwing a lot of incomplete passes and having 40-second drives, that's maybe a plan you can only hold on to for so long before your defense is going to bear the brunt of it.
Yeah, well, Brandon, Craig Bowl will be very offended that you mentioned him and Mike Leach in the same sentence, because he has made it very clear that they will never be a Mike Leach style offense.
I mean, both have lived in Wyoming, so there's your sentence. Cody native, Mike Leach.
Yeah, I'll always get a kick out of that anytime like we ask about the passing game, or the first thing he likes to go to is, well, we're not going to be Mike Leach and spread it out, which is like, nobody expects you to throw the ball 50 times a game. You just need to try to be like somewhat efficient in the passing game. But yeah, no, I'm with you. And like I said, I'll be interested to talk to Tim on Thursday night after that practice, just to see exactly what he says about that, if it matches what some of the players have talked about, and if that's something that he actually plans on integrating as part of his offense. Now, you mentioned them not talking about formation. Yeah, I mean, good luck getting anybody within that program right now to talk much about anything going on with the offense and what it's going to look like in that sense. I think we actually asked A. Neberhart on Tuesday night about that, and his answer was pretty much like, I can't give away too much, and pretty much left it at that. So, yeah, they're being pretty tight-lipped about it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they picked up the pace. Now, I don't expect them to be going out there and averaging 90 plays a game. I don't expect that at all. And maybe it's a situation where you pick your spots, right? Maybe to go a little up tempo. I mean, hey, let's not huddle after. If we pick up a first down here. Let's not huddle after this play and just get up to the line. I mean, maybe there's going to be a mixture of huddling and no huddle. I mean, who knows?
Hey, slow is a tempo technically. So, I mean, I bet fans are happy to hear it. If nothing else, like it's something different. Even like if you're saying, even if they just pick their spots, and I think it almost feels like a football trope where you'll watch an offense that's playing terribly all game until the final 2 minutes of the first half, and then suddenly they just look like the greatest show on turf when they're forced to run this up-tempo style of offense, and then fans are always like, well, why don't you do that all the time? Why don't you build the whole plane out of black boxes? But like I get that it's not that simple, but I do think sometimes it can be a way to break up stagnation on offense.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, what they've been doing the last handful of years, procuring the passing game, has not been working. But to your point, I mean, regardless of what you do and how you do it, the objective is to move the ball and put points on the board. So Wyoming just needs to be able to do that better than they've done that, obviously, the last 2 or 3 years. But Wyoming will have its 8th practice on Thursday, and it's right past the midway point of spring football, and that spring game on May 8th will be here before you know it. But Brandon, let's go ahead and take a break there, and when we come back, we'll talk some NFL draft as it pertains to Wyoming. Welcome back into the Postcast, and now, Brandon, I just wanted to hit on the NFL draft a little bit. It's quickly approaching. The draft will start with the first round a week from Thursday, and then continue with the middle rounds on next Friday and in next Saturday. And I don't think Wyoming's going to have any players draft. I mean, I don't know who would even be in the mix for them at this point to be drafted, considering as young as they were and the few seniors that they did have. Most of their probably guys that are going to get looked at the next level have decided to return and take advantage of the NCAA's extra year of eligibility. So I wanted to just in light of this and in the spirit of the NFL draft, wanted to take a look at next year and who some of Wyoming's top NFL draft prospects may be. I want to start this conversation with the disclaimer that me and you are not draft analysts. We're not experts on this. We have really no idea.
Speak for yourself.
And I have not. I mean, I have not talked to any draft analysts yet. When it comes to some of the players that might be drafted, or some of the Wyoming players that might be in the mix to be drafted in 2022. So, I mean, this is all just sort of somewhat educated guesses at this point, and I mean, why not? I mean, everybody else sort of, guesses on this stuff. Even people get paid to do that. So, this is just sort of spitballing here. But I think the list has to start with Xavier Valladay and Chad Mumma. You have any disagreement with that, or anybody else?
No, I think that. I mean, I think that makes sense. I think running backs have frequently a different equation as far as making the jump, just because the wear and tear that they take is viewed as so important compared to other positions. But yeah, I think those would be the names that jump out. I mean, I don't know what your read is on, a Garrett Crawl, if he's a guy who's got a shot as well of at least getting some looks, if not hearing his name called. But yeah, I mean, I do take slight offense with you referring to me as not a draft analyst. I mean, I have Matt Miller's cell phone number, so But yeah, no, I will defer to you here on who are probably the most likely players to have a shot at going in the 2022 draft for sure. Now, if you want to talk about like 2018, I'll help you out.
Mm-hmm. What are you talking about from 2018? Josh Allen?
Whether Colton Donovan will get a look at long snapper, the Drew Van Manen prospects as a practice squad player. Yeah, some quarterback thing, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, what's your read on those two players to start with as far as NFL prospects go?
Well, you mentioned a good point about the running backs, which that was sort of why I was kind of surprised that Trey Smith decided to come back. Now, look, I mean, he hasn't been the primary back, I guess, on any team he's been on. I mean, he was a backup throughout his career at Louisville. He's been a backup mostly. I guess in terms of the definition, when you or the depth chart, I mean, he's been the number 2 back on the depth chart since he's been at Wyoming. Now it's, particularly last year when, even before, or I should go back to even 2019, before he suffered his leg injury that year. I mean, it was sort of trending in the direction of being a platoon situation with him and X. But I mean, this is now with the NCAA granting this extra year of eligibility and him deciding to take advantage of it. This is his 7th year in college. So by the time next year's draft rolls around, I mean, he's going to be 25, maybe by that time 26 years old. Like even if he had just a whale of a year for Wyoming, and rushed for 1,000 yards, I think his ceiling's only be so high because you're right. I mean, the shelf life for NFL running backs is short. If you're a running back in the NFL and you're still have a significant role on a team by the time you're 30 years old, you're doing really, really good. It's just the wear and tear of the position and the amount of hits that you take overall. So that's another reason why I think as long as X stays healthy this year and has another good year, I think that's why you most likely see him leave if he thinks he has a shot to get drafted, because he's, again, with this extra year of eligibility, he's now a 5th-year junior. So even by the time, he possibly gets drafted, he'll be, 22, 23 years old. Running backs sort of have to speed up the process for themselves. And that's why you see a lot of guys, if they have any chance of being drafted after their junior year, they usually declare and skip out on their senior season. I do think he has a chance to get drafted when you consider not only what he can do on the ground, but the fact that he can be maybe a 3-down back in the NFL with his ability to catch passes out of the backfield. Not that this is saying a whole lot considering Wyoming's leading receiver last year had 16 catches, but X was their second leading receiver last year with 13 catches, and he's anybody that's watched when it's not just the fact that he can catch passes out of the backfield. It's what he can do after the run, because a lot of his catches have been explosive. I mean, you remember the game against Nevada back in 2019. I think he had more than 250 all-purpose yards in that game. In the Arizona Bowl, he had a couple really long receptions. So he's a guy that can do a little bit of everything. And then part of the question for him in terms of sort of turning himself into a 3-down back is can he consistently pick up the blitz and offer pass protection in that sense? And that's obviously a big deal at any level, but particularly the NFL. I mean, if you can't pass block and pick up blitzes, you're not going to be on the field on 3rd down. So I think that's an area where he probably has to improve a little bit. But I mean, I just think in terms of his versatility and then being able to work on his blitz pickups, I think that's good. That makes him appealing, and I think he's going to generate some interest. And then Chad Mumma is going to be a really interesting one because this is a guy who last season was on pace for 140 something tackles. I mean, he had 72 in 6 games. Led Wyoming in sacks. Jay Sawvel was actually talking on Tuesday about the fact that he's one of their best blitzer, and they're going to use him a lot still going forward in that capacity. So he can do a lot of different things. He can run. And look, Wyoming's coaches have been talking about Chad for a while. When you play behind Logan Wilson and you're sort of buried on the depth chart of that position because he's there, it was just a matter of him being noticed, right? And now that he's done that, it's going to be interesting to see, because if he has if they play all 12, if they make a bowl game, 13 games, and he's sitting there again in the top 5 nationally in tackles, and has 120, 140 tackles by that point, he may have a decision to make on his future, because technically he's got 2 years of eligibility left with the extra year that the NCAA has granted to all the fall sport athletes. But it could be a situation where he plays himself into that kind of talk. And the easy comparison is Logan Wilson, and I do think there are a lot of similarities in their game. The one aspect where Chad I don't think is there yet is the pass coverage and being a true 3-down linebacker at this point, because that's really what, by the time Logan Wilson was a senior and coming out for the draft, I mean, that's what had teams sort of salivating for him. And that's why he was taken as high as he was, because he had the natural coverage abilities. And that was a little bit easier for him because he had the background in that, right? Being a former defensive back at Natrona County High School, it just sort of fit him more naturally. Whereas I think and Chad's admitted this, that he has to work at that a little bit more in terms of his coverage. But I think he's got just about everything else. So, if he continues to improve in that aspect, and he gets to the point where he's being talked about as a 3-down linebacker, that's got a lot of weight in the NFL now, considering just the type of offenses that teams both at the college and pro level are running. I mean, you don't see 6'5", 250, 260 pound linebackers anymore. I mean, you're seeing more in the linebackers safety hybrid spot. These guys that can, that are 220, 230 pounds that can run now, because you've got to. Because you got teams that are spreading you out with 3 and 4 receivers and throwing the ball all over the place. And it's going to be interesting to see how Chad does in terms of his athleticism and speed now that he's up to, I think, about 240 pounds. Coaches have said this offseason. He played last season around 225, so he's put on good 10, 15 pounds. They say it's good weight that he's put on. They expect him to be able to maintain his speed at that weight. But I think he's a guy. If he even comes close to what he did this season, next season, I think he's going to have that choice to make sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think just having that, predecessor or whatever you want to call it, that example of, hey, Logan Wilson's, Wyoming middle linebacker came out of the system, and I think it's a little early in his career to say too definitively what his reputation is as a draft pick. But I mean, he got on the field a whole lot as a rookie, and so I think that helps. Logan, was a 4-year starter. Maybe that gives him a slight edge there, and you would have a real good sense having seen them play side by side, the kind of athleticism comparisons. But I think the kind of numbers he was putting up last year, it's gonna, if he, like you said, if he's anywhere near that, it's hard to imagine he's not going to get a look. So, I guess overall defensive performance plays into it as well. Logan was coming off, 2 pretty good defensive years, 2 or 3, maybe even 3. Anyway, it helps if the overall defense still has a good reputation. But I'd imagine he's got a path that's already paved there for him. And then for X, I think it's interesting too. I definitely not like a NFL scout or an expert on running backs, but I wonder a little bit sometimes with the really physical runners, if if that translates as well to the NFL, just when, everybody there is a pro caliber athlete, and that physicality maybe doesn't, pay off quite the way it does in college. But by the same token, if you're a speedy guy, everyone in the NFL is also faster. So,
yeah,
I think, like you're saying, I think he's got enough weapons around him weapons to his game that he's going to get some looks. And yeah, with Trey, I think we've talked about, like, the name may be enough that somebody might take a flyer on him in, like, the 7th round or something. I don't know, or at least give him a workout. But also, I think it made sense probably for him to come back because, yes, the mileage is real when it comes to being a running back, but at some point you do have to have the numbers in college, and I don't think he quite has them yet. So I'm not shocked to see that. Or, if he doesn't think the NFL is where he's headed, I don't know if he's talked much about that specifically. Maybe he just wants to enjoy one more solid year of competing in college and then move on from there. I don't know what his aspirations are, but I think I'll be real interested to see what X looks like in an NFL offense. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's all about fit too, right? Like, I mean, you've got these different NFL teams that run different offenses, and so what one team may not see as a fit in terms of X or any other running back, another team might, just because they may use a running back more that as a receiver than another team would, or So it's fit, and also this is a crapshoot too, because a lot of this can come down to pure testing, right? I mean,
yeah.
you see some of these prospects every year that you've never heard of, or that they think he's not really a true draft prospect, and then he goes and runs a 4.3, 4.2 as a receiver or whatever, and you can't teach that kind of speed, or you can't teach this, you can't teach that, and so and there's a lot of times where. And you think about some of the smaller school players, and where they go out and go to a pro day or combine, and they test off the charts, and then suddenly a team drafts them just off their potential, right? They're just this athletic freak. Well, hey, we can sort of you may not be refined, but you've got the athleticism. We'll figure everything else out.
Mm-hmm.
So look, a big part of Logan getting drafted as high as he did too was the fact he went to the combine and ran a 4.6. Sure. Again, it's sort of hard to it's really hard, I guess, to sort of evaluate this, particularly when some of these guys might be still 2 years out from this. But another guy I think could possibly sneak into the back or the later rounds of the draft, and whether it be in 2022 or 2023, is Keegan Kreider. Because I see a lot of, Chase Roulier in him, or at least he seems to be on that trajectory, right, where, he was a guy that started multiple years, all Mountain West guy, was really durable. I mean, Keegan he started all 12 games as a redshirt freshman back in 2018, and he has not missed a game since. Maybe, at least that I know of. That maybe there's one or two I'm not misremembering, but I mean he's been the stalwart and the Mountain West best center for the last couple of years. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Brandon, but I think Chase was a guard, right, a guard center, and then moved to center with the Redskins once he was drafted a few years ago. But I think Keegan is definitely. He's obviously a talented center and has been durable and big, durable interior offensive lineman that can move people at the point of attack. I mean, those are attractive to every NFL team. Mm-hmm. And so, I think Roulier was drafted at, the 6th round a few years ago. I mean, I think Keegan is a guy that could, may fall in that area, I guess, or part of the draft. But, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and Chase moved to center his senior year, actually, at UW. They moved him over, and NFL teams definitely seem to like that versatility. And, I think, similar with Logan and Chad, there, it doesn't hurt when you can point to a guy who's succeeding in the NFL. And Chase, we'll see if we ever get to a point like this with a Wyoming quarterback, but Chase is a real easy person to point to and be like, hey, he's he's done great out of Wyoming. Let's not overthink it and draft the next Chase Roulier. He's done great for himself in Washington, and I mean, I covered Keegan some, but I had probably more familiarity with Chase, and so I don't know if you can speak to this, but Chase was just like an extremely smart human being. I mean, like doing crazy. I forget exactly what type of science, but he was like an all-world student as well, and I think teams loved seeing that, and it certainly seemed to translate to his ability to be at the center of an offense. But yeah, I mean, I think this offensive line has obviously done a really good job, at least in the run game the last few years. And center, I think is not a bad position to be at in college to show that you can you can handle the ball. So I don't know. Yeah, I think I'm not shocked to see that as a possibility, just with how they've recruited offensive linemen over the last 5 years. I think they brought in a lot of big boys, and they come in with NFL-sized frames, if not fully built as far as getting in the weight room and everything. So it makes sense that at least one of them would pan out and move on to the next level. So I think if the run game continues to put up those huge numbers, and obviously if the offense in general can prove itself a little bit more, and if it can address some of the issues in pass protection, all those things will help. But I think when you're looking at a 6'4", 309-pound guy as Keegan's listed, that's NFL size.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I was just about to mention, it's not like he's some sawed-off dude in the middle of their offensive line. That's some, former walk-on who's sort of overachieving and a real feel-good story. And, I mean, he is NFL size. He has a prototypical body type for an interior NFL offensive lineman. But to your point about intellect, I mean, I don't – you're not playing center in college football or basically any level of football and being dumb. Without, I mean, there's a lot of stuff the average fan doesn't realize in terms of the responsibility of that position, what all goes into it. You're having to make checks at the line. You're having to call out, point out blitzers, call out deep fronts, change the protection or slide the protection. I mean, that most of that usually falls on the center. So there's a lot of information, particularly pre-snap, that guy has to process, and very intellectually, I don't think there's any doubt that he would be able to handle the mental part of the NFL game. But some other guys that I think are intriguing. You mentioned Garrett Crawl, and another guy that has that body type. I mean, 6'5", 240 pounds. I think if you're an NFL team, you want to see some of those sack numbers increase. I think the most he's had is 6.5 in a season while he's been at Wyoming. Now he's another guy that's sort of dealt with some nagging injuries throughout his career. So it's been hard for him to stay healthy. They only played 6 games last year, but he even missed half of those, recovering from a foot injury in the offseason. So if he can stay healthy and bump up those sack totals some, I think he's another guy that absolutely could get a look. Isaias Gandy, the safety, is another intriguing guy because he's talking about a guy with a prototypical body type. I mean, 6'1", right around 200 pounds for a safety. Jay Sawvel has mentioned him the other day as another one of their better blitzers. And if anybody's followed Wyoming football, safety play and their defense is those two have sort of gone hand in hand just in terms of the productivity. And then, there's obviously a recent pipeline. You talk about Marcus Epps, Andrew Wingard, even Tyler Hall, just in terms of secondary guys that have gone to the NFL in recent years. Elijah Halliburton, even though he wasn't drafted, and as far as I know, I don't think he's on an NFL roster right now, but, his only season as a starter a couple years ago, he led the Mountain West in tackles. So, Isaias Gandy put up some pretty good stats in his first year as a full-time starter last season, and he'll be back. I think he's a guy that could possibly, catch some eyes in the NFL and at least intrigue them. And then their corners, to me, are really intriguing. C.J. Colton and Z.Z. Hearn, long, lanky guys on the outside, particularly C.J. I mean, he's listed at 6'1", that's, again, we're talking about prototypical size. I mean, that's it for an NFL cornerback, and he just looks so much bigger than that. I mean, he's just long and rangy. They have a lot of guys who I don't know if they're going to get drafted, but they sort of have those body types to at least project to a point where you could certainly see some NFL teams saying, let's take a look at this, particularly with some of the recent history that Wyoming has had at some of these positions in terms of putting guys in the league.
Yeah, and even safety, if you want to go back further, like Chris Krasinski and Tayshaun Gibson, if I'm not mistaken, are both safeties from Wyoming in the NFL as well. Or I think Krasinski might be retired now, but safety you right there. I think it's also crazy that I think if I'm remembering correctly that Isaias and Xavier are both even getting talked about here. Just I think it's a testament to Wyoming's recruiting, because I remember when both those guys committed, they were like the types of players who didn't have their face on a profile page yet, like on Rivals or whatever. Right. No stars, no, just a gray outline like that. They were just on nobody's radar. So for them to find guys, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, especially if Valladay has another huge year, but diamonds in the rough for sure for those two guys to come from that and be even on the NFL discussion. And I think in general, I'm a little bit just, this is a theory off the cuff, I'd have to go back and look, but I feel like the couple of years when Wyoming had these players in this range that kind of you're talking about, maybe not going to get a combine invite, but might get a look at a workout or maybe get to a practice squad. I feel like with most of them, they were guys who, played fairly well because Wyoming was coming off a division-winning season, and you could point to on-field success, but maybe not like guys who were prototypes, right, as far as NFL size at their various positions. And I think now, for that to be the case with some of these guys, that's another I think a testament to recruiting, that they're bringing in players whose by the time they get out, especially their physique is right on paper with the Power 5 players. So I think that's that's my loose recollection, at least, as I'm trying to think back to the guys who got workouts but not combine invites. It wasn't like I was like, oh, he's obviously going to get an invite because he's 6'5", 250 pounds. I think you're seeing that a lot more now than you were maybe at the beginning of Bull's tenure.
Yeah. Okay, Brandon, so do you want to take a stab and put out a prediction as to who the next Wyoming football player drafted will be?
Oh, boy.
You don't have to. I'm just asking.
I'm trying to think if I can think of anything more creative than just saying the two front runners that we've already said. I think that with Valladay, Mumma would have to come out early, right, to beat Valladay, so maybe X's.
Possibly.
Or it depends on when they'd want to.
Yeah, they both technically have 2 years of eligibility left.
Okay. I'm gonna say X because I think him being a running back lends itself to him leaving sooner, and I think he's had the college career where he's gonna get a look somewhere, even if it's in the day 3 range. So I'm gonna say X.
Oh, I'm with you.
I'm picking chalk.
No, I'm with you. I do think Chad Mumma right now is the best NFL prospect on their roster, but I do think X will be the next player drafted, or the first one drafted, because he is a year older, because, again, he is a fifth-year junior, whereas Chad's a fourth-year junior now with this extra year of eligibility because he hasn't redshirted yet. And like I said, like we were talking about earlier, it's just there's more urgency on for running backs to, if they have any chance to get drafted, to go ahead and go out, just because the tread on those tires wears down pretty quick, particularly in the NFL. So I'm going to take the safe pick too and go X. But man, I would not be shocked if Chad Mumma has just another huge year and is a guy who declares early and By the way, who was the last player before Josh Allen at Wyoming to declare early and come out early for the draft?
Well, it'd be Brian Hill the year before, or 2 years before.
Okay.
Yeah, he got drafted 2 years. Wait, I'm sorry. He got drafted in 2017 then, right? So,
well, he left after his junior year?
Yeah, so Brian, I think in a very similar boat. Yeah, they were back-to-back years. I think in a very, very similar boat to X as far as, being a very proven running back. I mean, I don't know where X is, especially with the funkiness of last year as far as like Wyoming all-time numbers, but Brian had proven everything. He'd set the single-season record twice. He'd set the career record, and he was getting a lot of mileage on him, so... And again, like a physical running back, left early, got flack from it as players sometimes do for leaving early, but he's still in the NFL, and he was getting, I was occasionally looking at him in fantasy football last year, and other people picked him up ahead of me. So like he's relevant in the NFL all these years later, and he's made a career for himself. So he hasn't had like maybe the career Chase has, but I think he's a pretty decent comparison for X.
Yeah. No, I was asking because it's rare, particularly for the players at Group of Five level, to declare early. I mean, it has to just be a unique situation, like in Josh Allen's case, where you're a top 10 pick, or Brian's case, where you've set all the rushing records at your school, and your stock's really not going to get any higher than that. So you basically struck while the iron's hot.
Yeah, and I laughed because before I thought of Brian, I thought the answer was going to be Brett Smith, and Wyoming fans still bemoan the fact that he left a year early, thinking that he had a good shot at getting drafted, and then wound up in the CFL. And I think they definitely would have liked to have him around for Craig Ball's first year. Be interesting to see where things would have gone if that had been the case, but alas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing too. You never. Everybody's situation's different, and even if you're not even sure if you're going to get drafted, maybe it's best for you to move on from school. I mean, who knows? I mean, everybody has different circumstances, but I think Chad could be the next guy that has the decision make when it comes to, hey, dude, am I going to come early out? Or am I going to come out early or not? And you just don't see that a whole lot at the Group of Five level. So. Yeah, it'll be interesting. But speaking of the NFL draft and this year's NFL draft, Brandon, did you see what the Philadelphia Eagles did in terms of some of the players they're thinking about drafting?
Full transparency, no, but you just told me about it. Go ahead and I have a similar story, but go ahead and give the folks the news.
Yeah. Well, so this is all in the spirit of overreaction season, always being in full swing every time the NFL draft rolls around. But I saw this on Pro Football Talk, but the Eagles coach, Nick Sirianni, and their general manager, Howie Roseman, had a press conference on Wednesday where they talked about how they played paper, rock, scissors with some of the draft prospects they're interested in, during the pre-draft process and their interview process, to gauge their competitiveness. Yeah. And what is that? I don't look, I understand NFL teams want to turn over every single rock. They want to do every
single paper, every single scissor.
Good one. But
we didn't plan that, folks.
No, we didn't. They want to do every single bit. I get it. They want to do all their homework on these guys. You're investing a lot of time, a lot of money into the future of your franchise. Cool. But what does that even mean? Like, are they like if you're the coach of the GM, you're like I'm just trying to envision this whole scenario in my head. But like if you put down scissors and the prospect puts down paper, if they don't just throw a full 10-year-old temper tantrum and throw a fit, are you eliminating them from your draft board because you don't see them as being competitive? This just seems crazy to me.
Yeah, I don't know. If I'm a GM, I'm not drafting anyone who picks paper. That's you're off my board. No, this reminds me of when I was covering the draft when Josh was going through that process. There was a storyline that year when some player made a big headline, but I think they also did this with Taven Bryan, who came out of Florida, but by way of Natrona County High School, where he had said that a team had a staring contest with him, and similar effect. I think this is a case where like there are some businesses for sure, some fields. I think the NFL and most pro leagues might fit this, where there's just like too many people. Like too many people have jobs with these teams. Not all
too many
of them have
too many cooks in the kitchen.
One job's worth of like responsibilities, and someone's like, man, I gotta think of something to justify the salary. We're gonna rock paper scissors, everyone. Shoot. I mean, to read it very charitably, I think it's possible that, and I'll give some people an insight here if anyone ever wants to apply for a job in the Star-Tribune newsroom. But our editor Josh Wolfson will sometimes ask people in job interviews what their favorite cereal is, and not because we're not going to hire someone who says Cheerios, but because it's a way to like get someone to think on their feet and to see how they react to a question they might not have been expecting. So maybe in a very, very charitable way, that's what they're going for. It's just to, hey, I'm going to ask something really weird and see how a player adjusts. But I don't know even why that is quite as relevant like on a football field compared to being a journalist where you have to interview people. And I don't know. I think it definitely is more likely just a stupid thing.
Yeah, but like even like but if we're talking about in terms of trying to gauge competitiveness, like seriously, like I mean, what's like, is he supposed to throw a temper tantrum? Is that how you're supposed to know that he actually cares about losing? Like I think
what you're supposed to do is, have you ever played rock, paper, scissors? And it seems like this happens a lot, but the same, you and the other person throw the same thing like 3 times in a row, and then it's like a mini game of chicken. You're just like going straight rock, and you're like, all right, who's gonna break? Maybe like they're just like, yeah, I want the guy who was gonna throw 40 straight rocks, and be like, no, you changed. Maybe that's side note: are you a rock, paper, scissors person or a rock, paper, scissors shoot person?
I mean, I can't tell you the last time I played rock, paper, scissors as an adult.
Apparently, you had to decide who was going to take the dog out between you and your girlfriends.
Or maybe I've never made a visit to the Eagles front office.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, what I can remember, my vague memory of it is I do rock, paper, scissors, shoot. But
I wonder if it's a regional thing. Yeah, I'm definitely you throw on scissors where I come from.
I don't know. I just like stop overthinking this stuff. Like did this player who's played football all his life and has played against if it's a player from a Power 5 school has played against some of the best competition in the country, like is that not enough to show you that they're competitive about this and probably want to go out there and win games and do this for a living? Like it's just, I don't know. Like I said, it's every year. It's something, whether it be like Wonderlic scores or, it's crazy questions at the combine. It's just like, you're doing way too much, feels like.
Yeah, well, I probably didn't help that the player I remember having, like, quote-unquote competitiveness questions on the most high-profile scale recently was Josh Rosen, and that hasn't panned out very well so far, so maybe that reinvigorated them to, double down on that being a real trait you can evaluate by any means possible.
Yeah, I don't know. It always strikes me as odd.
Or they just want like psychopaths. Like I want to draft a guy who will like punch me in the face if he loses rock, paper, scissors. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe that makes for a good football player. It doesn't seem super healthy.
Or headbutt me without a helmet on.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
gotta get a little blood going.
All right, Brandon. I think we're done here. One quick programming note before we get out of here. We may not have a podcast next week. I'm actually in the process of moving to a different place here in Laramie, and I've got to finalize that next week. So that's going to be taking up a lot of my time. So it's probably looking like at this point we probably won't have one. But if we don't, we will still have all of our coverage at trib.com and pokesauthority.com, and we'll definitely be back the week after, before Wyoming's spring football game on May 8th to talk a little bit about that and preview that. But as always, be sure to check out all of our coverage at trib.com, pokesauthority.com. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Pokes Authority. You can follow me on Twitter at Davis E. Potter. You can follow Brandon on Twitter at bfoster91. This podcast is on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and Omni. So be sure to subscribe, download it, give us that 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast on our website at the Pokescast link, which is updated each time a new episode is published. Brandon, appreciate you joining me as always. Appreciate all of you guys as listening. And we will talk to you again soon.
Cheers.